The Chicago Bears can't afford to overlook the Cleveland Browns as some easy win on Sunday.
And while the Browns are mathematically eliminated from the playoffs, Shedeur Sanders still has a lot to play for. All that and more coming up on a crossover edition of Locked On Browns and Locked On Bears.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into this crossover Thursday Locked On Bears, Locked On Browns podcast. I am Lorin Cox, host of the Locked On Bears podcast, alongside Spencer German from Locked On Browns. Really appreciate you tuning in and making Locked On Bears or Locked On Browns your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. As always, our crossover Thursdays are presented by Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineups on our crossover Thursday today. We are going to go through the biggest storylines for both of these teams. We'll go through the top matchups that are going to decide who wins this game, and those keys to victory certainly come out of a few of those matchups to kind of get a sense of what it would take for the Browns to pull off the upset and what the Bears need to do to get back in the win column this week. But Spencer, as we start, I think we're going to hear a lot in this broadcast about the weather, and I don't want a small talk on cold weather this weekend, but from an actual like football standpoint, certainly the Browns are used to cold weather, but how well do you think this team is built for a game where maybe throwing the football will be a little bit more difficult and it becomes a slower ground and pound line of scrimmage kind of struggle?
Yeah, it's a great question. You know, this comes up a lot in Cleveland, just because Cleveland Stadium is literally similar to Soldier Field, built on a lake. It is open air, so you get all the elements, you get all that stuff in there. And as the Browns go through this entire thing right now where they're working on building a new stadium, it's going to be an enclosed dome. It's due in 2029 is when it's supposed to open. There's all this debate over, like, do we want to be a team that plays in a dome or do we want open air? And then the fans are all mad because it's like the history of the Browns football being outdoors and all these things. And I think this conversation is always interesting because people seem to think it's like a home field advantage one way or another for like a northern team. But my feeling is always like, guys, there's players on rosters from all these teams around the NFL who are from like the South, who have never seen snow in their life. There's people from like the West Coast, like Carson Schlesinger, one of the Browns' great rookies right now. He's born and raised in California. Like, he had never really seen snow until a couple weeks ago here in Cleveland. So I don't know that it's like anybody really wants to play in that and anybody really like is better off with it. I think both teams obviously have to deal with it. I think a lot of times when it's colder, it does sort of necessitate more of a run-heavy game, which in theory benefits the Bears, who are one of the best run teams in football this year. So I'm curious to see what the weather sort of looks like. I will say this past weekend it was pretty cold, and that did not prohibit the Browns from throwing the football a little bit here in Cleveland. And obviously we know Shedeur Sanders put up some really big numbers, looking to sort of build upon that in Chicago. So we'll see. But certainly anytime the weather's going to be it wasn't quite as cold as it's going to be this coming weekend. And anytime that's the case, you do plan on it impacting the game plan, how things play out, all those different things. And injuries too. Injuries can be a factor in that type of weather when the teams line up and play on Sunday.
Well, I will say Chicago Bears fans and Browns fans can commiserate here about the stadium thing. We're going through the exact same thing here, too, of like, yeah, 2028, 2029, probably going to be a dome, but what about the history of the team being a cold weather, tough team? So that no matter what happens on Sunday, we can all sort of enjoy the ongoing drama of like how they're going to do the stadium and all that stuff. But yeah, I'm with you there that I think Chicago feels good about their ability to just say, hey, they can hand the ball off 30 times and get a good 5 yards per carry and slow things down, control the clock. And you know, their defense can make a couple stops, maybe get a turnover or two off of Shedeur Sanders. Like it's kind of the formula for them right now. And I think that's going to be one of the big storylines for them in the game is it's like, yeah, well, we'll talk about Myles Garrett and the big sort of matchup there. That's going to be a big factor for Chicago's offense, but bigger picture, right? It's like, hey, you know, the Bears only got one turnover last week against the Packers, and that was fewer than they've been used to. And the defense kind of needed one or two more stops in that game. And the feeling is like, well, will Shedeur Sanders give them a couple more opportunities, right? There's a difference between actually catching it and getting the interception thrown in your direction, but the quarterback got to go halfway and you got to go the other half there, and feeling like, well, if Shedeur gives them those opportunities, that can be the difference between the Bears really taking control in this game. And if Shedeur takes good care of the football and kind of plays a smart, sound game, and maybe they run the ball a little bit more and slow things down, that that the Browns could put a real scare into the Bears with this defense. It doesn't rank super well in most categories besides turnovers, and it's masked a lot of what the Bears have done poorly. And if the Bears are running the ball all the time, it's not going to be a big high scoring shootout. So every possession could end up mattering just a little bit more.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm glad you brought that up off the rip, because everyone is obviously highlighting the fact that this Bears defense is so good at causing turnovers. It's been the story of their season. It's been one of the reasons why I think they have been as good as they are. But as I kind of have gone through the numbers myself, like, they're not a team that gets a lot of pressure. They're not a team that gets a lot of sacks. Like, I see opportunities here for Shedeur Sanders to potentially have some time to throw, to make those plays. But the question is going to be, like, can he protect the football? I know the Bears do like to blitz a lot, and I'm sure they're going to try to throw some looks his way that he maybe hasn't seen yet. That's kind of been the story against Shedeur since he took over. The second half of that Ravens game back in Week 11 was they started throwing all kinds of blitzes at him because it was his first time out there in the field, and he didn't really have a lot of success in that game. But he's also sort of started to pick up certain things, understand more of what he's seen in front of him, and trying to diagnose certain things and be able to make those plays. So is he going to be able to combat that? Is he going to be able to protect the football? Last week, he had a very ill-advised interception where he even admitted after the game, I was just trying to make something happen. I felt like the offense was kind of stuck in the mud. I threw it up there. Probably just needed to get rid of that football. If he can limit those, if he can make sure he doesn't do those, make those rookie mistakes where you're just trying to force something, I think it certainly bodes well for the Browns offense to potentially have more success against this Bears defense than I think people realize. But it's also, I say that understanding that every single week is a struggle for this Browns offense in general. And they have, they might start a game hot and then they go ice cold for like 2 or 3 quarters. Like, you just don't really know what you're going to get. It's kind of been the story of their season on that side of the ball. But I'm curious to see, how Shedeur prepares and what he looks like for this Bears defense, understanding that the number one thing you can't do, which is always a priority, is turn the football over, or else it is going to be sort of a doomsday scenario for them, and they'll probably lose this game by a lot.
Have you been able to discern much of a difference between, like, when things are clicking and when they're not? I think about their running game in particular, that I think on the whole hasn't been super consistent, but like a couple weeks ago against the 49ers, all of a sudden Quinshon Judkins looked like, the number one back that they thought he would be, but then kind of falls back down to earth against the Titans. They couldn't run that much against the Raiders, but like, they've had games where running game looks great and then games where it doesn't. And I'm sure with Shedeur, there's been those same kind of ups and downs. Are there themes or consistencies of like, oh, here's what's going well when it's working and here's what's not when it's not?
Yeah, I think the run game is a big part of that. Like, I feel like when their run game is having the most success, it's best for the offense, and they're able to then do other things off of that. The play action game is working a little bit better. This past week, like, this was one of the highest scoring games they've had all season, scoring 29 points. And you liked a lot of what you saw from Shedeur Sanders. Now, as much as we're talking about the Bears defense maybe not being as good as it's maybe looked at because of the turnovers, it certainly isn't the Titans defense. So I'm not anticipating they're going to necessarily get to 29 points, which is the big issue, because the Bears can win shootouts. They've proven that this year. And so if it becomes one of those games, I'm kind of curious to see how the Browns kind of keep pace if their run game isn't working. But I think that has kind of been the key. And it's been hard to get any sort of consistency with that when the offensive line has been continually banged up, a lot of injuries up front. They just lost this past week Ethan Posick, their starting center, for the rest of the season with an Achilles tear. So they are constantly interchanging parts up there. They've been inconsistent and they've aged out as well up front. So that's been an issue. If they can't get their run game going, I think it is going to be a struggle. I mean, and on the other side, Lauren, I'm curious your thoughts on this, because as good of a run team as the Bears are, they're going up against one of the best defenses in football at stopping the run, but also just in general. But what I do think is interesting is, like, the Titans found some ways to sort of exploit Myles Garrett a little bit, get him upfield, and then just kind of block him out of the play where they want to run the football and use his over-aggressiveness against him. And it turned into a couple big runs for Tony Pollard and a big touchdown run for him. So I'm curious to see the Bears, again, being as elusive as a run, or as great of a run team as they are, how they try to maybe replicate that, or if they try to replicate that, seeing what the success the Titans had a week ago.
Yeah, I imagine in both the running game and the passing game, the entire Bears game plan is going to be centered around Myles Garrett, as I'm sure most opposing offensive coordinators do. So let's take some time to go through that matchup and some of the other key matchups in this game as we continue our crossover Thursday Locked On Bears, Locked On Browns podcast. This Crossover Thursday podcast is brought to you by Prize Picks, the better way to play daily fantasy sports. The holiday season is one of the best times for sports, with bowl games and big basketball matchups, playoff pushes. It's all happening all at once. And while we're all making choices every day, one of the most fun places to make the right call is Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the easiest way to get in on daily fantasy. You just pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, lock in your lineup, and you're in the game. For example, you could pick more or less on Shedeur Sanders' passing yards, Caleb Williams' rushing yards, DJ Moore's receptions, Jerry Jeudy's touchdowns, you name it. They've got a ton of different ways to play at Prize Picks, not just football, basketball, hockey, when the baseball season comes back around, it's all there on Prize Picks. So download the Prize Picks app today and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. It's good to be right. All right, as we continue our crossover Thursday, Locked On Bears, Locked On Browns, we turn our attention to some of the biggest matchups in this game. And maybe it's a sin to have gone this far without talking more about Myles Garrett, but kind of intentionally saving him for this portion of the conversation because it is the number one matchup that I'm sure every team circles, but especially for Chicago. I know Myles Garrett lines up over the left tackle the vast majority of his snaps, and that is very much the weak link on this Chicago Bears offensive line. Second round rookie Ozzie Trapillo making, I lose track, is it his 5th, his 6th, his 7th start? Only a handful of starts under his belt. And this will be by far the best individual player. I mean, it's probably the best individual player any left tackle will play all season, but especially for a young guy, like you've been on, easy to medium difficulty all season, and now you crank it up to extra, extra hard. There's a lot of concern there that, Trapillo's done pretty well in pass protection, all things considered, but he's really been the weak link in the running game. So when we talk about how the Bears are going to game plan for this, expect a very right-handed running game. They've already been a pretty right-handed running game because Trapillo has struggled, but especially with Garrett on that side, they're going to run away from him a ton. I would expect the Bears to roll out passing plays with play action away from Myles Garrett a ton and try and eliminate as many one-on-one matchups as possible there. Tight end into chip, running back into chip, sliding Joe Tooney from left guard over to help. They're going to throw every little thing they can at Myles Garrett, and I just hope that they don't try and, throw screen passes past him or anything like that, because he's going to get a few batted passes for sure in this game, and I'd like to limit that damage.
Yeah, like stopping Myles is no easy feat. Having watched this team, having covered this team, like I see it week to week, you're right about the fact that a game plan for the opponent is always built around how you're going to stop him, and it almost doesn't matter who you have, right? Like even 2 weeks ago, the Browns were playing the 49ers, and he's going up largely against Trent Williams for a lot of the game, and Trent Williams gave up a sack because Myles put this ridiculous Euro step move on him in a football game and got through and then just sacked Brock Purdy like it was nothing. Like sometimes when you have like good on good, someone's good is going to be better than someone else's good, and they're just going to win. And so that's, he's a headache. The Bears, I'm sure, are going to try to throw a lot of different things his way. That's why I brought up that Titans game plan of sort of, there was a number of times where they let him get upfield and then had somebody kick him out so that they could kind of run behind him and taking advantage of that. I'm curious to see how the Bears maybe utilize those things. But, Myles, especially as he tries to chase this sack record, he's at 20 for the season, needs 3 to break it. He's trying, and I think he, in his heart of hearts, wants to do it before 16 games rather than 17 games. So it feels like it's the true record, and he's not just like getting the extra game to do it. So these next couple games are going to be huge for him to try to add to that total and close in on that total, maybe surpass that total. So you can bet he's going to be pretty motivated. And the other part of this too is like Caleb Williams being a mobile quarterback. Usually you'd think, oh, that might help you. But let's be honest, like Myles is used to that. He goes up against Lamar Jackson twice a year every year. So he knows kind of what it takes to track those guys down. He's relentless when it comes to stopping the run too. So he's never going to quit on a play. I would imagine the Bears have a lot of different things planned for him. He's seen it all. It's nothing at this point. It's like nothing you need to like hang your head about if you let Myles get through for a sack, because he's just that damn good. That's what it kind of comes down to.
Yeah, I would be pretty certain, like assuming he's fully healthy and everything for the whole game, like he's gonna get a sack. Like if he's out there for a regular game, he's gonna get at least one in this game. Caleb Williams will, I don't say let him have one, but there will be at least one that he's gonna get there. I will say Caleb has been one of the best quarterbacks at avoiding sacks this season, but the one Achilles heel in that this year, the theme has been the truly elite pass rushers bring him down. Like Max Crosby got him, because Caleb's really confident in getting away from cornerbacks and linebackers that blitz, and even defensive ends, he has shrugged off a couple of times. Like, it's been one of his most, he gets the Harry Houdini comparison and nickname a lot this season. But like, there have been a couple of times where he thinks he can get away from Max Crosby and he can't. He thinks he can get away from TJ Watt and he can't. He thinks he can get away from Micah Parsons and he can't. And Myles Garrett is definitely in that category of guys that he's going to think he can get away with, but he can't, because he gets away from everybody else. But those like truly elite, the most special guys find a way to bring him down. And I suspect there'll be at least one of those in this game. And it wouldn't surprise me if this was a multi-sack game, just given the matchup on that side. As much as Ben Johnson's very good at scheming and game planning around this kind of stuff, Myles Garrett is often scheme and game plan proof.
Yeah, listen, Ben Johnson's offense is incredible. I actually asked Kevin Stefanski about that on Wednesday, like the idea of just like, what do you know about it? And he actually said like he doesn't have a ton of familiarity with Ben Johnson, like they don't know each other very well personally, but that he knows that his offense is very, modern and has all these different dynamics to it. And we saw what he did in Detroit with like trick plays and all this different stuff. So in a way, like that mind game of like the offensive mind that Ben Johnson is going to be sort of a behind the scenes matchup in this one that the Browns have to account for. We talk about Myles Garrett against the Bears offensive line. I'm curious. I understand that the Bears don't have a ton of sacks, but I am curious to see how the Browns offensive front handles just the Bears and what they bring to the table, especially knowing they blitz as much as they do. And if they try to do that even more with Shedeur back there, how they sort of handle those things, because as much as Myles can disrupt a game plan all on his own, how the Browns protect him, and if they're able to protect him, is going to be, I think, a pretty important challenge for this team if he's going to have success and try to actually build upon what he did against the Titans. I know like Montez Sweat is a guy that you obviously have to take very seriously as an edge rusher. There's certainly some guys you have to account for up there. And with how banged up the Browns offensive line is, like, it's just not a guarantee. Yeah,
it's a group that I think the name value of like Montez Sweat and Grady Jarrett and Von Dexter's a young ascending defensive tackle. Like, they sound like they should be better than they are. And they like Montez Sweat's up to like 8.5 sacks this season, which is like top 15. So like he's making more of the impact plays, but like the like snap to snap consistency of the pass rush is one of the biggest weaknesses on the Bears roster right now, and feels like something that's going to hold them back in a potential postseason type of push because they're just not getting it. That's why Dennis Allen is blitzing so much, is because the 4-man rush is just not consistently getting home. And the hope, the idea is that, well, if the Browns are injured enough on the offensive line, that the Bears can take advantage of some of those one-on-one matchups, but they just haven't really had the horses to do that. So they have to blitz more. He loves to go into the dime personnel, bring in CJ Gardner-Johnson as that 6th defensive back and put everybody up at the line of scrimmage. And then you're not sure who's going to come and who's going to go. Jordan Love totally tore their blitz apart last week. Like he had some of his biggest plays, big touchdowns. He just, blitz is coming, man coverage behind it, floated up to Christian Watson, easy money way too often. I think the Bears will be confident that Shedeur Sanders might not be as sharp as Jordan Love in that, and that's the gamble they're willing to take.
Yeah, I was going to say that I think is where this all kind of comes to a head, right? Is you have Jordan Love, veteran quarterback. He's seen the Bears over the course of his career, so he knows some of the personnel that those guys have. And he certainly has studied the tape more. He's got a better sense of those things. Shedeur Sanders being a rookie, he's still very raw. And that is where like the blitz that we talk about from the Bears, even though they can't get as much pressure with their front four, like if that's going to work hand in hand with that secondary, that is just filled with guys who are ball hawks and make plays. Like you mentioned, CJ Gardner-Johnson coming in as that nickel guy, but like, Jalen Johnson, a ton of respect for him as a player. Jaquan Brisker's a good player. I know Byard on the back end as a safety, like he's been able to make some plays. So that is where obviously the Bears' bread and butter is on defense, and how there's that sort of like domino effect of, can the blitz show Shedeur some things and throw Shedeur off enough that he makes those mistakes, I think is going to be one of the biggest, most important things that plays out in this game, and how the Browns handle that offensively. Can their offensive line hold up? David Njoku's dealing with an injury. He's one of their best blockers at the tight end spot. Like, is he going to be ready to go in this one? If it's too much for them to handle and if Shedeur just isn't prepared for it, then yeah, there could be a lot of big turnovers, and that's obviously a recipe for the Bears to win.
And one other little mini storyline I can throw in here real quick before we move on is like, you talk about Jalen Johnson and some of the other guys. Like Johnson was injured for a lot of the season, came back 2 weeks ago, but he's still only playing about half of the snaps on defense, up to maybe 2/3 last week, and does not look 100%. Like he is very clearly a bit of a shell of himself, and that's something that Bears fans are kind of keeping an eye on. Like, is this going to become a problem at some point. And same thing with linebacker TJ Edwards. Last week was his first game back, played about half of the snaps in that game in his first game back, and just doesn't look good. And so they've got a few of these like injured guys that they're not quite getting full capacity play from, and they're kind of waiting for that to kind of come back to fruition. And maybe against the Browns they do, or maybe they continue to struggle, and it's like, oh wow, the Browns are getting some plays against Jalen Johnson, and it's like, yeah, he's not full strength. But certainly these are all going to play into some of the biggest keys to victory for both teams. So as we continue our crossover Thursday Locked On Bears, Locked On Browns podcast, we'll take a look at how we take these matchups and these storylines and put that into a formula for success for both teams. Stick with us right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Our Crossover Thursday podcast is brought to you by Car Gurus. Car shopping used to feel more exciting and not so confusing. And with Car Gurus, you can get back to that confidence you deserve. They cut through all the noise so you can actually see the best deals on the cars you want. Because when it comes to a big purchase, you deserve the best deal. And Car Gurus makes that whole process simple by giving you the real information, real deal ratings, and more listings than anyone else. So you can shop the way you want. Car Gurus deals ratings help you compare cars quickly without having to guess whether the price you're getting is actually fair. And then you can filter by everything you want: mileage, trim, features. So you're only seeing cars that actually fit what you need. Car Gurus connects you with trusted dealerships for a transparent and hassle-free buying process. With over 4 million listings, the most of any major online automotive marketplace, you'll always find the best deal. Shop the way you want with the tools, data, and unbiased deal ratings that make it easy. Buy or sell your next car today at cargurus.com. That's CARGURUS, cargurus.com. Our Crossover Thursday podcast is also brought to you by ZocDoc. Guys, it's almost 2026, and those days of waiting for something to become a full-blown emergency before you see the doctor, they're over. No more walking it off for 6 months. No more pretending that weird shoulder stiffness is just sleeping on it wrong. It's time to take your health seriously, and ZocDoc makes that easier than ever, because staying healthy is more than hitting the gym or eating right. It's about actually getting things checked out when something feels off. Using ZocDoc makes scheduling easier. You can search for in-network doctors and book right in the app with real appointment times listed, including same-day visits. So there's no more back-and-forth phone calls or waiting weeks to be seen. It really lets you compare providers using real patient reviews, not advertising. So it's a simple way to keep your health a priority, even with a busy schedule. So stop putting off your doctor's appointments and get the care you need. Go to ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. That's ZocDoc. ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL. As we continue our Crossover Thursday, Locked On Bears, Locked On Browns podcast, I want to thank you for making either of these podcasts your first listen each and every day. And if you are an everyday listener, you can always join the Everydayer Club for Locked On Bears or Locked On Browns and get no interruptions, ad-free members, and plus a members-only Discord access and more, all for just $5 a month or $50 a year. So you can always go check out LockedOnPodcasts.com/Everydayers Club to find your access to Locked On Bears or Locked On Browns. But Spencer, as we look at the biggest keys to victory, we've talked around, okay, cold weather, maybe running the ball, not turning the ball over. Can you sort of synthesize a little bit, like, if the Browns are going to win this game, because they're, I think, touchdown underdogs on FanDuel, like, what does a Browns victory look like on Sunday? What do they have to do?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, it's the old cliche, right? But they have to find a way to protect the football and not give it up to this Bears team. They've been so opportunistic in that way. And that's a tall task, especially when you have a rookie quarterback, to make sure that you're not making those mistakes and giving the ball up and causing any issues there. So it certainly starts there for me when it comes to this Browns team. And then there's, ancillary parts that go along with this. You mentioned the run game earlier. If they can finally get that going consistently, it would pay dividends. The nice thing is the Bears defense this year has been lower in the league in terms of rushing yards given up per game. I think there's some ways to find some success doing that. But at the same time, like, I don't have a lot of faith that the Browns are going to be able to do it because, well, we haven't seen them do it consistently enough this season anyway. And like, Quinshon Judkins is a phenomenal player, but a lot of his yards are coming after contact. So he's kind of having to create a lot on his own. In general, I think the Browns are a pretty good run blocking team, but they just aren't getting they're not opening up the holes enough in the way that they need to for Quinshawn. And he's also a rookie who's kind of learning as he goes and learning some things. And he obviously missed a lot of time because he started late because he missed training camp and all those different things. So but I think that matters. It matters to get Shedeur comfortable. I don't think you want against a defense that has the types of ball hawks that this Bears defense does. I don't think you want Shedeur back there throwing it as much as he did a week ago against the Titans, where he threw it 43 times. I think you want to limit that as best you can, and relying on that run game would be a huge point of emphasis, I think, for them if they can actually get it going this week.
Yeah, I think from a Bears perspective, one of the other things the Browns need to do is not beat themselves along the way, and that's something I think this Bears defense has been really good at taking advantage of. There aren't as many times where you see the Bears defense made a great stop there. I mean, it certainly happens, but one of the things you see is opponent has a penalty on holding on second down that puts them in 3rd and 15, and then you're not really feeling like the Bears made a big stop there. The offense kind of put themselves in a bad spot, or the quarterback puts the ball out to dry and a defensive player picks it off, or they miss a block and they get a sack on 3rd down, right? Where it's the Bears have to do their part, but a lot of times you feel like opposing offenses will beat themselves, and Chicago will just take it on a silver platter and say thank you. And so I think if Cleveland can stay out of their own way, take care of the football, cut down on penalties, and control the clock a little bit, I think there's a winning formula there that just requires a certain amount of consistency that I'm not sure Cleveland has been able to do for 4 quarters much this season.
Yeah, I think that's spot on, for sure. Just in terms of and honestly, that's not a tall task in this matchup, because the Browns offense is notorious this year for shooting themselves in the foot. Sometimes it's a penalty on a key play. Sometimes it's just a guy misses a block that would have become a big gain on the run game or whatever. Sometimes it's a missed throw or a drop pass by a receiver. It has been nonstop, just a comedy of errors, if you will, by this football team. So in that regard, the Bears have to be smart about like not committing any penalties and things and giving the Browns extra first downs, because that will kind of take care of itself. Like they will struggle enough that the Bears will get the Bears defense will get the ball back to the Bears offense for them to sort of have opportunities. And that is how this game should go if they just let the Browns kind of play things out with their offense the way that it is. I think conversely, the Browns struggled mightily, as I mentioned, with the Titans run game this past week. And that sort of like two-headed monster of DeAndre Smith and Kyle Monangai is going to be a tall task for this defense to sort of stop and corral and slow down. I'm curious again to see if the Bears try to take some stuff from that Titans game and use it in their play, sort of use it in their advantage this week to try to continue to exploit that. But their run game is also so good that they might just be like, this is our identity. This is what we're going to do. We're going to give it a try, and it might still work because those two guys have just been so great. And I think that is a point of emphasis for this Browns team after how last week went against the Titans, where they're sort of honed in on, we got to make sure we're really on our P's and Q's, trying to stop these guys, sound tackling in open space, making sure they don't break any big ones on us. But I also wonder, like, this team lost Malik Collins in the middle of their defense after that 49ers game for the season. And it did kind of feel like last week you were missing his presence in the middle of that defensive interior. And that led to at least some of the reason. I'm not saying it was the entire thing, but at least some of the reason why I think the Titans had some success running the football is because that defensive line was missing one of its key members.
Yeah, the injury report's going to be really important for both of these teams to watch this week, because they both got some guys that are like, maybe they could play, maybe they're not on IR, and it's sort of a week to week.
Well, the Browns injury report this week is like a grocery shop list. Like it is lengthy as can be. Kevin Stefanski wasn't ready to rule anybody out on Wednesday. But we'll have to see. But yeah, there's a lot of guys who are banged up right now for this Browns team.
So I think Bears fans come away feeling pretty confident heading into this matchup, thinking like, yeah, it's not going to be a huge struggle per se. I think the perception is like the Browns will keep it close for a little while, and you feel like there might be a moment or two where it's like, this is closer than it should be, but by the end the Bears will pull away. But what's your from Cleveland's perspective, what's the feeling? Is there a real like optimism that, hey, Sanders is on the verge of being ready to pull off, a big win and upset like this? Or is the feeling like, no, Chicago's probably, a few steps ahead? Yeah.
So two things. I think the way that you laid out this game playing out, I think is probably pretty fair, mostly because that's how like most of the season has gone. It's been, the Browns are keeping it close with the Baltimore Ravens, or the Browns are keeping it close with the Detroit Lions, or the Browns are keeping it close with whoever. And in a few instances, like them upsetting the Packers earlier this season, they kept it close for the entire game, and then they did just enough in the end to sort of pull out the win in sort of miraculous fashion. But in most cases, it's kept close for a while, and then the floodgates just kind of open because the defense can only stop it for so long when the offense is going 3 and out. Now with Shedeur, the offense has had a little bit more juice, and this is the other point I wanted to make. Like, I do think you're seeing an offense that has been able to be a little bit more productive, take more shots downfield. Seems to play with more confidence with him under center. So it's a little bit different than it was early in the season. It might take a little bit longer to sort of separate yourself from this offense at times, because they do have a little bit more potential to it. And I do think, to your point, there is a lot of excitement in Cleveland about the idea that maybe Shedeur makes this an interesting conversation by the end of the season and gives the Browns something to think about in terms of their quarterback for 2026. Like, can he be the guy? And if he plays well, if he builds upon the Titans game, and I'm not saying he's got to throw for 300 yards again, but if he plays well against the Bears, and maybe you lose, but he throws a couple touchdowns and whatever, I think people will be more excited. And then it kind of trickles down the last 3 games of the season. Shedeur is a very divisive, controversial topic in general. He's a polarizing player, rightfully so. But I think generally Browns fans are keeping an open mind about the possibility that, hey, if he plays well starting this week against the Bears and down the stretch, this could be our quarterback in the future, and then maybe we don't need to draft one in April. So I think there's a lot of excitement about that, and his work ethic is certainly on full display. He wants to be great. It's just about him now tangibly doing it out on the field and doing it consistently, and that obviously starts this weekend. So we'll see what he brings to the table. But I think last week was certainly a good step in the right direction for him to prove that he can be a guy or the guy for the Browns in this league.
It certainly wouldn't surprise me if they connect on 1 or 2 deep shots downfield. The Bears have been a little bit more vulnerable lately on some of those downfield shots, just some either misplaying the ball in the air or some miscommunications in coverage. And there'll be maybe some positives for Browns fans way, regardless of the outcome. But that's going to do it for our Crossover Thursday Locked On Bears, Locked On Browns podcast. Be sure to tune in tomorrow for our respective shows as we get you ready for the game on Sunday, and then we'll be breaking it all down afterward on our Monday podcast. So for Spencer German from Locked On Browns, I'm Lorin Cox from Locked On Bears, and we will talk to you again tomorrow.